My name is Eva Moore. I'm 61 years old and I've lived alone for nearly 8 years since my husband passed away. We built our life together in a cozy apartment on the edge of town, and while it's never been grand, it holds everything that ever felt like home to me. That night, my son Carter and his wife Natalie invited me out to celebrate my birthday. Just the three of us, they said. Nothing too fancy, just dinner and maybe a glass of wine. I wore my best scarf and even put on the pearl earrings Carter gave me years ago, the ones I save for special occasions. The restaurant was one of those new age places, all exposed brick and minimalist lighting, where the waiters call you by your first name and sit down next to you when they take your. Natalie handed me a gift bag before I'd even taken my coat off. Inside was a tiny baby onesie with the words "World's Best Grandma" stitched across the chest. Her eyes sparkled as she said it was time to start planning the nursery. I blinked, caught somewhere between the warmth of the gesture and the odd sensation that I had missed something. Then Carter chimed in, smiling that tight, rehearsed smile of his, and said they'd be needing more space soon. Natalie leaned across the table and said she was so grateful I'd agreed to let them move in. I smiled politely, trying to keep up, still unsure when exactly this conversation had taken place. Before I could ask, Carter stood up and tapped his wine glass with his spoon, asking for everyone's attention. Even the server paused. He gave a little speech about celebrating me and how generous I was for helping them start their next chapter. He announced that they'd be moving into my apartment, my home, and that it just made sense now that they were starting a family. The room felt distant, like I'd suddenly stepped outside my body. I looked at the wine glass in front of me, unsure whether I should raise it or throw it. Instead, I did what was expected. I nodded and forced a smile, hoping the conversation would shift. It did, but not in the way I needed. Natalie started describing her design ideas. She'd repaint the living room, swap out my curtains for something more modern, maybe even turn my sewing room into a nursery. She said I could still come visit, maybe keep my plants on the balcony if I wanted. Carter added that they'd give me plenty of time to move out. No pressure. No pressure. Those two words stuck with me longer than the toast, the meal, or the wine. They didn't even ask. They assumed. They declared. My 32 years in that apartment were reduced to a transition plan I hadn't approved. I sat through dessert like a statue, nodding in all the right places, smiling when it was expected. But inside, I felt something slipping. A boundary, maybe. A sense of self. I walked home alone that night, said I wasn't feeling well, declined their offer to call a ride share. My heels pinched, my shoulders ached, and the cold air made my eyes sting. But at least in that moment, I was the one choosing the direction. I kept replaying Carter's voice in my head, how he said it like it was already decided, how Natalie filmed it for social media, how everyone clinked glasses like it was a done deal. Back in my apartment, the walls felt tighter. The pictures of my late husband looked like silent witnesses. I touched the edge of our bookshelf, the one he built, and for the first time in years, I didn't feel comforted by it. I felt invaded. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just sat at the kitchen table for a long time, still in my coat, wondering what exactly I had agreed to. And when. The next morning, I woke up hoping maybe I had misunderstood. Maybe Carter and Natalie had just been caught up in excitement. But when I opened my phone, the first thing I saw was a video posted by Natalie. It was a slow pan of my living room, set to soft acoustic music, with a caption that read something like, "Starting our next chapter. Grateful to Mum for this incredible gift." Comments poured in, strangers thanking me. Friends congratulated them. Someone called me the world's most generous mother-in-law. I hadn't even had a full cup of coffee before I realized I was watching a version of my life that I hadn't agreed to. That video wasn't a spontaneous thank you. It had been filmed on purpose at the exact moment Carter made the announcement. Natalie had even adjusted her phone to get my face in the background. My expression, my silence, my still hands wrapped around a wine glass, all of it was now proof. To everyone watching online, I had given my blessing. There was no room for doubt, no space to explain. I felt like I'd walked into a movie halfway through and somehow ended up in the final scene. Later that day, another post showed up. This time it was a photo of my balcony, the one I'd filled with succulents and potted herbs, with the caption, "Dreaming of nursery views." A few people commented how sweet it was that I was letting go so gracefully. Letting go. The words landed hard, as if I'd been holding on too long, as if passing my home to them was some natural next step. But no one had asked me if I was ready. No one had asked at all. Carter sent an email that afternoon. It wasn't cruel. In fact, it was polite, efficient, even cheerful. Attached was a PDF labeled Move-In Prep with bullet points and proposed dates. He called it a smooth transition plan. Natalie added a Pinterest board link with phrases like neutral nursery palette and guest room makeover. There was no line for me to sign. No formal request. But there didn't need to be. My consent had been assumed and already published. I sat on the couch, clutching my phone like a lifeline. The home I had shared with my husband, the space I had spent years protecting, was now part of a timeline I didn't write. I didn't shout. I didn't call. I just sat there, listening to the silence swell around me. I realized that somewhere between the birthday toast and the comments section, I had stopped being a person and started being a backdrop. They were telling a story and I was just a prop. In the days that followed, I watched my life get rewritten one post at a time. Natalie shared a photo carousel of my hallway, my armchair, even the little ceramic dish I use for keys. The caption talked about generational love, about honoring family, about how some mothers give the greatest gifts without saying a word. She made it sound poetic. I guess silence makes for great storytelling when you're the one holding the pen. There were hashtags, grateful heart, new beginnings, thanks mum. I stared at my phone, scrolling through smiling emojis and sweet messages from people who didn't know me. People who said I must be an angel. People who called me inspiring. And there I was, frozen in the background of their joy, a footnote in a story where my voice didn't matter. Because apparently, I had already said yes. My nod, my silence. That was the signature. Carter didn't post as much, but when he did, it was subtle. A shot of his old bedroom door with the caption, "Coming home." Another post of Natalie holding a paint sample next to my kitchen wall. The comments said things like, "So lucky to have a mum who understands," or "Every couple needs support like this," and I wanted to scream, not because of what they said, but because I couldn't correct them without looking bitter or mean or unstable. I tried calling a close friend to talk it through. Her voice softened when she said, "Maybe they just got excited. Maybe you did say something that could be misread. Maybe." That word stung worse than anything, because it planted a seed of doubt even in me. I started questioning my own memory. I wondered if I'd missed a conversation, agreed without realizing, nodded too long, or smiled too big. It was a strange kind of erasure. I was still here, still in the apartment, still alive, but online I'd already become a story about a generous mother stepping aside with grace. A narrative so neatly packaged no one cared if it was real. And I started to understand something I'd never wanted to know. When people decide you're the villain, even your kindness becomes ammunition. Even your quiet gets twisted into consent. I hadn't said yes. But they heard it anyway. And, worst of all, they made sure the world did too. It started with a drawer I hadn't opened in months. I was looking for an old repair invoice, something completely unrelated, when I found the folder. It was thick with documents. My husband's will, insurance papers, power of attorney forms I barely remembered signing during a hospital stay 2 years ago when I had pneumonia. Carter's name was on one of them. Power of attorney. My hands went cold. I sat down, reread the date and tried to recall that week. I had been feverish, foggy. He'd brought me the forms, said they were for insurance. I hadn't asked questions. I'd just signed, trusting him because he was my son. That trust cracked the moment I saw his signature next to mine, already neat and permanent. I texted my lawyer that night, not thinking it was urgent, just a quick question about whether the document was still valid. She called the next morning. Her voice shifted as soon as I mentioned Carter's name. She asked if I had revoked the form. I hadn't. She told me to come in immediately. That's when the panic truly set in. She met me at her office with a yellow legal pad and a tired look. I handed her everything, including the PDF Carter had emailed titled Move-In Prep and a copy of the Pinterest board. She flipped through the papers, pausing at the power of attorney. Then she said the words that dropped my stomach through the floor. If Carter found a doctor willing to say I was confused or showing early memory issues, even just on paper, he could start a guardianship process. I stared at her, waiting for the part where she'd tell me it wasn't likely. Instead, she adjusted her glasses and told me it happens more often than people think, especially when real estate is involved, especially when it's family. She leaned in and said, "You need to be careful what you say from now on. And whatever you do, don't sign anything." That afternoon, I walked home in the same pressed slacks I'd worn to my husband's memorial. I felt numb, but also clearer than I had in days. This wasn't about a young couple needing help. It was about a planned takeover. I wasn't just an aging parent. They were helping. I was an obstacle they were preparing to legally remove. The next step was obvious. I wasn't sure what kind of game they thought they were playing, but I knew one thing for certain. I wasn't going to lose the home I had built with my husband, not to the people who still called me Mum while drawing up blueprints behind my back. The rules had changed. Now it was my turn to learn how to play them. I started keeping a folder on my phone titled Proof. Every screenshot, every message, every oddly worded email went into it. I reread the power of attorney document late at night, circling phrases I didn't understand and researching them until I did. I stopped speaking over the phone and insisted that everything go through text or email. If I were going to fight this, I needed a trial. I needed to show I was clear, deliberate, not confused or forgetful, no matter what they tried to claim later. Then Natalie showed up one afternoon without warning. She smiled too widely, held out a gift bag with my name scribbled in marker, and handed me a cold drink. She said it was my favorite, hazelnut iced coffee. I noticed the bubbles clinging to the side of the cup. No one is careful about the pregnancy downsides of carbonated caffeine without hesitation. I didn't say anything, just watched her sip it and talk about nursery color palettes. She walked through the apartment like she owned it, stopped at my sewing room and said it would be perfect for a changing table. Opened drawers, made notes aloud, and asked if I wanted help decluttering. She didn't ask for permission, she just moved. When she went to the bathroom, I peeked inside her bag. I didn't take anything, just looked. What I found was more than suspicious. It was deliberate. There were floor plans of my apartment with labels scribbled in pen. Bookshelf, donate, hall closet, remove door. A Zilius estimate printed with my address circled in red ink. I snapped a photo, slipped everything back into place, and sat on the couch like nothing had happened. When she came back out, I offered her dinner and a glass of wine. Let her stay another hour, let her believe I was softening, but inside, something had hardened. They weren't planning to live here, they were planning to flip it. My furniture wasn't being rearranged, it was being evaluated. My curtains weren't outdated, they were in the way. I wasn't a mother. I was an asset. That realization landed quietly but completely. They weren't waiting for permission, they were just waiting for paperwork. Or maybe a mistake. A text out of context. A moment of doubt captured on camera. So I gave them nothing, just nods and gentle replies while I documented everything. I backed up my photos on multiple drives. I printed emails and tucked them inside a locked drawer. I even recorded myself reading full pages of my bank statements out loud, time-stamped, not because I was scared, because I was preparing. I wasn't just collecting proof. I was building a wall, brick by brick, word by word, and by the time they realized it, I'd be on the other side, watching, quiet, ready. I called Iris at 6 in the morning. She was a retired real estate agent and an old friend who knew how to keep her mouth shut. She didn't ask why I was whispering, she just said, "Start from the beginning." I told her everything while pacing the living room in slippers, a legal pad in one hand and a lukewarm cup of tea in the other. When I finished, she was quiet for a beat and then said, "You need to sell it." Quietly, no listings, no open houses. I agreed before she could even finish her sentence. We moved fast. Iris tapped into her network of private buyers. No signs, no photos, no online listings, just word of mouth and cash-ready offers. I gathered every deed, bill and ID I had and kept them locked in a metal box under my bed. I went through my emails, deleted anything that might show hesitation, and kept responses vague but polite. Carter thought I was softening. I let him believe it. I even liked one of Natalie's nursery inspiration posts just to keep the illusion going. To prepare the apartment, I called Frank, a quiet man from church who owned a truck and never asked questions. He came over one afternoon while Carter was at work and Natalie was live streaming a makeup review. We packed up the items that mattered, my husband's tools, our photo albums, the good dishes, then labelled the rest as donations. I boxed it all and stacked it in the corner where no one would think to look. The home was slowly emptying itself behind their backs. Then I set the bait. A small, battered suitcase I hadn't used in years. I placed it upright in the hallway, just visible from the front door. Natalie saw it 2 days later when she dropped by unannounced with a container of soup. Her eyes lingered on the suitcase. She smiled. It worked. She thought I was preparing to leave, that I was giving in, that everything was falling into place. I cooked dinner that night, posted a photo of it online with the caption, "Nothing like home." I made sure Natalie saw it. I answered Carter's texts with soft words. Let him believe I was just tired, just slow, just grateful. Behind the scenes, Iris had already sent me listings for small homes in quiet towns. I picked one with a lake view and an overgrown garden. A widow owned it and wanted to sell it fast. We made a deal in less than 48 hours. The entire time, I said nothing to Carter. Not one hint. Not one warning. I wasn't trying to start a fight. I was ending the performance. And the suitcase in the hallway? That was my curtain drop. My silent cue to the audience that the show was almost over. They just hadn't realized it yet. I left at 4:35 in the morning. The city was still dark, the streets quiet, just the sound of my suitcase wheels brushing against the pavement. I didn't leave a note for Carter. I didn't leave a key. I didn't owe them closure. Everything was clean. The sale had closed, the funds transferred, the deed filed. I even left behind the curtains, freshly washed and folded just to be gracious. Inside the apartment, I'd placed a folder on the kitchen counter. It held the final paperwork for the buyers, a checklist, and my forwarding address for the new owners only. I took nothing I didn't own. I left nothing undone. I didn't even look back when I turned the corner at the end of the block. I didn't need to. I had already said goodbye, just not in the language they understood. By the time Carter arrived later that afternoon, the locks had been changed. He knocked first, soft and unsure, then harder, more impatient. He called my name through the door, then tried his key. It didn't fit. The jiggling stopped. A pause. Then his voice. Accusations mixed with confusion. He said I was being dramatic, that we were family, that we needed to talk. I didn't respond. Not because I was scared, because there was nothing left to say. He slid an envelope under the door. Inside was a legal notice, some fabricated review about transitional occupancy, his last desperate attempt to gain access. I sent it to my lawyer with a single line, confirm receipt. She replied, before sunset, they have no legal standing, You're clear. And just like that, the chapter was sealed. That evening, I drank tea on the porch of my new home, 4 hours and 2 states away. The lake was still. The trees leaned into the breeze like they had no one left to impress. My phone buzzed once. Carter. I let it ring. I let them all ring. I powered it off, set it in a drawer, and shut it away with the rest of the noise. There were no final words, no confrontation, no slammed doors, just silence. And for the first time, that silence didn't feel like absence. It felt like power. It felt like peace. They hadn't lost me with one bad decision. They lost me when they stopped seeing me as a person. And now all that remained behind that door was the echo of their own assumptions. I hadn't yelled, I hadn't begged. I had simply left completely, elegantly, quietly. The cabin sat at the edge of a quiet lake, surrounded by tall pine trees and a dirt path that curved like it had been drawn by hand. It wasn't fancy. The kitchen was small, the floors creaked in certain spots, and the back porch leaned just slightly to the left. But it was mine, not borrowed, not shared, mine. I unpacked slowly, one box at a time, listening to the wind move through the trees like it had something gentle to say. No one knocked. No one filmed. No one asked me for a single thing. In the mornings, I stepped outside with bare feet and a cup of tea, the steam curling into the air while birds traced the sky in looping lines. I planted mint and thyme in the raised bed behind the cabin, watered it every afternoon with a tin pail I found in the shed. I liked the smell of wet dirt. I liked the way the sun hit the lake just after noon. I cooked again, simple meals, roasted vegetables, thick soups, and cornbread from scratch. I ate at the table with the radio playing softly, no screens, no voices trying to spin love into leverage. I made a friend named Claire who lived 2 cabins down. She had moved here after a 40-year marriage fell apart, and now made soaps in her garage that smelled like eucalyptus and stubbornness. We played chess twice a week, sitting on her porch with a blanket across our knees and a thermos of spiced cider between us. She beat me most nights, said I was too polite to win. I liked that. I liked being known for something small and real. The air felt different here. It carried no weight, no expectations. When it rained, I listened. When it was quiet, I didn't fill it. I let it be. I journaled in the evenings. Nothing dramatic, just lists. What I noticed, what I liked, what I wanted to remember. I wrote down the date the mint first sprouted, the day Claire taught me how to make tea soup. The moment I realized I hadn't thought about Carter in hours. There was a time when silence scared me, when it felt like proof that something was wrong. But now, silence was the sound of nothing being asked of me, nothing expected, nothing taken. I had fought for that silence, brick by brick, page by page, and now it wrapped around me like a blanket, not a cage. The hurt didn't disappear, but it softened. It faded into the corners of the day like shadows that no longer reached the center of the room. At night, I left the windows open, let the breeze carry in the scent of pine and stillness. I stopped locking my phone in drawers. Most days, I forgot where it even was. The lake changed color depending on the hour, and sometimes I sat and watched it do just that. The world didn't need me to perform anymore. I didn't need to explain. I had chosen this life, not as a retreat, but as a declaration. This is what peace looks like, not quiet because you're afraid, but quiet because you're finally safe. I named the fund after my husband, not because he would have wanted revenge, but because he understood what it meant to protect something, quietly. The Quiet Legacy Fund now helps women over 50 who are trying to reclaim their lives from the grip of financial control. Not just money, power, voice, stability. The things that slip away slowly when love turns into leverage and silence becomes currency. I didn't start it to prove a point. I started it because I had lived it, because I knew what it felt like to be erased behind smiles and softened words. I wanted women like me to know they weren't crazy, they weren't alone, that it isn't selfish to draw a line. Sometimes it's the only thing that keeps you from disappearing altogether. The fund is small, but it's growing. People have started to share their own stories. Some send letters. Others just send a check with a name and nothing more. That's enough. That's the legacy I care about. Legacy isn't what we leave to those who expect it. It's what we build for those who need it. It's not always passed down. Sometimes it's passed sideways, to strangers who become sisters, to voices that never had room to rise. I used to think my story ended the moment I locked that apartment door behind me. But the truth is, that was just the start. I didn't walk away to punish anyone. I walked away to return to myself. And maybe that's the hardest thing to do. Not run, not rage, but simply reclaim. To say, this is mine, my peace, my name, my future. It doesn't come with applause, but it comes with a kind of stillness that no one can take from you. And sometimes I wonder how many others are still sitting at tables where no one listens, still nodding, still smiling, still being erased. If that's you, then maybe it's time to ask yourself the question I never thought I'd have to face. If you had the chance to start over, quietly and fully, would you take it? Or would you stay seated, waiting to be asked for permission to matter?